In March of 1989, in a brick high-rise on the north side of Chicago, a 52-year-old bookkeeper named Henry Vasco rode the elevator up with a neighbor, said goodnight in the hallway, and let himself into apartment 8F. The neighbor heard the door close and heard, distinctly, the deadbolt turn and the chain slide into its track, because Henry was a careful man and those were his sounds, every night, for 11 years. 2 days later, when Henry hadn't appeared at work, police drilled the locks and forced the door against the chain. The deadbolt was thrown from inside. The chain was seated in its track, from inside. The windows were painted shut, 8 floors up, and had not been opened in years. On the table was a plate of food, and the television was on, and Henry Vasco was not in the apartment. Stay with me, because the apartment was 480 square feet, and it took police 4 minutes to search all of it, and 36 years later that search has never really ended. Henry was the tenant every landlord wants, quiet, punctual, employed at the same accounting firm for 2 decades. No wife, no children, one sister in Milwaukee he called on Sundays. His life had the shape of a well-kept ledger, and that is what makes the inventory of apartment 8F so difficult to sit with, because everything in it was mid-use. A fork rested on the plate, in the food, which the medical examiner's office estimated had been served and barely eaten. A cigarette had burned itself out in the ashtray, a full-length ash, unsmoked, as if lit and set down and never picked up. The television was on with the volume low. His shoes were by the door, his keys on their hook, his wallet on the dresser, his coat on its peg. His glasses, which his sister said he could not cross a room without, were folded on the arm of his chair. The neighbor, a schoolteacher named Alma Ruiz, was interviewed 4 times over the years and never varied. Elevator, small talk about the cold, good night in the hallway at about 6:40 p.m. His door closing. The deadbolt. The chain. She was in her own kitchen for the next 2 hours, directly across the hall, with her door's peephole view of his, and she heard his television murmuring through the wall, and she heard nothing else. No visitor. No struggle. No door. The building superintendent confirmed what the police found. The door had one deadbolt, keyed outside, thumb turned inside, and it was locked. The chain was a heavy brass slide, and it was engaged. The responding officers had to shear it with bolt cutters after the door opened 4 inches and stopped. There was no fire escape at 8F's windows. The windows themselves, 3 of them, were sealed under decades of paint, and the forensic team confirmed the paint seams were unbroken. There was no attic access, no crawlspace, and the walls, floor, and ceiling were poured concrete. The kitchen had a small vent, 10 inches across. Nothing larger than a cat leaves that apartment without using the door, and the door said no one had. Don't stop here, because the detail that moved this case from locked room puzzle to something else entirely came from the food on the table, and it took a week to surface. Henry ate the same rotation of meals, and the plate held pot roast, and the police thought nothing of it until his sister came to close up the apartment and stood over the table and refused to move. The plate was from their mother's china, a pattern Henry kept boxed in the closet and never used. The sister had packed that box herself when their mother died, and the box was still in the closet, still sealed, its tape yellowed and intact, and when police opened it every piece of the set was inside. All of it. Including, wrapped in its original newspaper from 1961, the plate. The same pattern, the same size, the same chip their mother's plate had carried on its rim. The plate on the table and the plate in the sealed box were, as far as any examiner could determine, the same object, existing twice. The investigation did everything a 1989 investigation could. The food was analyzed and was exactly what it appeared to be. The apartment was fingerprinted and held only Henry's prints and the expected traces of the neighbor and the super, none anywhere that mattered. Henry's bank accounts were never touched again. His pension went unclaimed. The Sunday after he vanished, his sister's phone rang at the usual time. She picked up, and there was open line silence for 11 seconds, and then a disconnect, and the phone company could tell her only that the call had come from within Chicago, and that it had not come from Henry's apartment, which the police had sealed, and which had, in any case, no one in it. Henry Vasco was declared dead in 1996. The building still stands, and 8F has had a dozen tenants since, and the ones who stay describe it as a perfectly ordinary apartment, and the ones who leave quickly tend to mention the same small thing, which the landlord has learned not to argue about: the chain. They find it slid into its track when they come home, on doors they left unlocked, in an apartment they live in alone. The lead detective, a methodical man named Kowalczyk, kept a copy of the file after he retired, the way detectives keep the one that beat them. He gave a single interview about it in 2009, and he did not talk about the chain, or the windows, or even the impossible plate. He talked about the cigarette. 11 years of butts in that ashtray's history, he said, and Henry never once lit a cigarette and failed to smoke it. A full-length ash means it was lit and abandoned in the same motion, which means whatever happened in a few seconds between the match and the first drag, while his dinner steamed on his mother's plate and the television talked to an empty chair. It happened, Kowalczyk said, to a man sealed inside 480 square feet with every lock he owned turned against the world, which is the part people never sit with long enough. The chain wasn't on the door to keep something out that night. Every night for 11 years, Henry Vasco came home, threw the deadbolt, slid the chain, and it never once occurred to anyone until it was too late to wonder whether the careful man across the hall was locking the world out, or locking himself in with it.